So a lot of people seem to love Gohan's character from the History of Trunks timeline because he's quote-unquote so cool.
He's so cool.
But I always had a different reason for truly respecting his character. As someone who aspires to be an English teacher, I have to be prepared to teach everyone the different types of characters and stories in literature. That, of course, includes describing tragic heroes. But seeing as to how I'm not an English teacher quite yet, I'll require a little bit of help. Please welcome KJ from Rakurai Network to Kairyu Analysis.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an honor, honestly, and I'm ready to talk about Future Gohan. Let's get it.
Rakurai and I were talking, and he gave a fantastic explanation of what makes Future Gohan a tragic character, but I'm gonna go one step beyond that and pull up the one and only Aristotle's definition of the character type. Aristotle claims that there are 5 main factors to what makes a tragic character. Number 1, a flaw or error of judgment. Hamartia.
When thinking about this rule, think of it as being something that's either extremely uncharacteristic of said character or something that plays so perfectly on a fitting trait to their character that it becomes their downfall in some way. Intent does not necessarily matter if the choice is still made leading from the cause to effect. Think of it as a quote-unquote tragic flaw, a flaw that ends up leading to...
Number 2, a reversal of fortune. Peripetia, brought about because of the hero's error in judgment.
These are essentially the repercussions, the consequences brought upon by the previously stated tragic flaw that our protagonist otherwise thought would lead to a positive result for them. After that, there is...
Number 3, the discovery of or recognition of the fact that the reversal was brought about by the hero's own actions. Anagnorisis.
It may take a long time for the hero to understand that they are to blame, but even if they are at an infinitesimal blame or an indirect blame, some level of that said blame on the peripetia is indeed on said hero. As I said, intent isn't necessarily the focus here, but rather just the factors that led to the fall, the cause and effect. As for the last 2, they are...
Number 4, excessive pride, hubris. And finally, number 5, the character's fate must be greater than deserved.
If by the end of a Shakespeare play or something of the sort you feel that the hero's final fate is a bit too heavy, then that's what they were going for. It must be at the greatest extent of what most people would call somewhat unrealistic, but in that set universe or time, it's still a very fitting conclusion or end of our tragic hero.
It is also stated that the character must be balanced in such a way that the audience feels pity for their fall and not relief at their demise as to being too imperfect, but rather due to being too perfect. The character must also courageously accept their death with honor.
Due to this, you won't see someone like Iago be called a tragic hero, even though the story of Othello is debatably focused on him. He had a malevolent, pride-driven plan from the beginning of the Shakespearean play, so even though his fall ended up happening, nobody felt sympathy for him, because he manipulated our main hero, Othello. In this instance, Othello's tragic flaw was naivety, and though I won't go too far into spoilers, the point is that Othello gets our sympathy, not Iago. As you were saying, Kairi?
Now, some of these things may seem like a stretch, but I guarantee that each and every one of these traits correlate with Gohan's character in the History of Trunks special. The History of Trunks special manga chapter is much shorter than the TV special, but even still, all of these points are visible. So let's start from number 1 and get to it. Number 1, hamartia. I would think that Gohan's natural kind heart that yearns for justice and fairness is his tragic flaw. This kindness to a fault attitude is what led him to knock Trunks out and leave him behind instead of taking him along for help in fighting the androids or cyborgs.
It wasn't necessarily due to overconfidence, nor was it due to an excessive pride in himself, as I'll get to later on. In a way, he knew that he was fighting a losing battle, but with every morsel of hope that he had left, he believed that he could supersede his fate. Leaving Trunks behind also symbolizes his belief that Trunks needed to survive in order to defeat the androids later on, which indeed ended up happening through a means Gohan could have never expected. Gohan's faith in Trunks and his benevolent self-understanding of justice were 2 things that led to his downfall in the end. Not to say he necessarily didn't expect it. Even still, this incredible faith and trust and overall purity of heart still was his tragic flaw that led to his death, regardless of his intent for doing so.
This leads to the very next point, peripetia, where Gohan's mistake in leaving Trunks behind eventually leads to his death.
Now, one could argue that even with Trunks, the result of the battle still would have remained the same. And to an extent, you're right. Remember, however, that in the manga, Trunks already knew how to transform into a Super Saiyan by Gohan's training. Even still, he still would not have been ready for the battle. Gohan leaving him behind was both a blessing and a curse, as his course of thinking was mainly driven by wanting to protect his timeline. As I said before, regardless of Gohan's intentions or plans for Trunks, in the course of actions leading up until his death, that being the effect, he did still make the fatal flaw of not potentially trusting Trunks to hold his own in the battle. We're simply analyzing cause and effect, not cause, intentions, overarching factors, and effect.
Now, this next one was the one I had to double check myself on, but sure enough, there it is on page 176 of volume 17 of Dragon Ball Z. That one panel is all we need, but we're lucky and get 2 panels. That expression is the realization that he may not survive this and that he misjudged the power of the androids. That's what the sweat evokes. This isn't just shock, this is a realization. This is, oh, I messed up.
This isn't as clear to see in the TV special, or at least not from first glance, but this idea is very similar to how Goku's expression after officially defeating Frieza and Namek is in the manga a look of grief rather than pure disdain. One could say that we're reaching, but facial expressions and reactions are very important in analyzing these characters.
Number 4 is the hubris, and we only need look at the previous page to see it in action. I've been training hard. You won't beat me this time. It's your turn to lose. There's that Super Saiyan-like cocky attitude. We come to expect it from Dragon Ball characters, but we cannot forget that this is a sign of pride and a declaration of certainty in one's own abilities. The fact that tons of characters in this series share that hubris doesn't make it any less.
This could be interpreted as Gohan making a bluff. Heck, that's the way I first saw it. But then again, he would not have left Trunks behind if he didn't have total confidence that he could handle the immense task. Though, of every point mentioned, this is one of the few debatable ones in my personal opinion, but in our eyes the confidence is there. Also, it's my belief that perhaps his hubris isn't of himself, but perhaps his pride of raising Trunks as his student has made him prideful in Trunks' potential as a martial artist. Either way, Gohan has present hubris either in himself or in my view his faith in a Trunks that he trained personally to inevitably save the future.
This is for Gohan!
Yes, Gohan needed to die. Yes, you needed to feel like he didn't. The fact that the question, did Gohan need to die, is even asked is evidence towards the answer being yes. If you've ever seen the movie Stranger Than Fiction, think of it like the story that was being written in that film. The story is not the same and is not as powerful without the character's death. The quality of the tale would be diminished without it, and the fact that we can point to a single decision and recognize that that one choice is what set them on this path is, once again, further evidence that the character needed to die.
Would Future Gohan be a fan favorite character if his death didn't evoke such heavy emotions from viewers across the globe? Being attached to a protagonist only to see them meet their end is something that can make you feel even more strongly about your devotion to said character. If not for Future Gohan's death, Trunks may have not had the motivation to go to the past, save Goku, have enough training done by the time of him going back to his time to defeat the androids. If not for Gohan's death, I cannot say for certain what would become of the present Dragon Ball cast.
Hindsight is 20/20. To err is human, and to write a realistic character is to remember these things. A tragic character is one whose demise either came from good intentions, like Gohan's kindness to a fault, or from one minuscule act of misjudgment. If you don't like tragedy, that's fine, but for those of us who do, like myself who loves Hamlet and KJ who loves Othello, this character's fall resonates and is written beautifully in such a short amount of time. But what do we know?
We only know English.
We can't speak or read Japanese. I'd like to give a special shout out to my patrons for continuing to support my channel.